Corridors Season 1. So as some of you might already know by now, Walking Digital Corridors is really aimed at bringing ideas and thought leadership to salespeople and customer success people to help them obtain commercial conversations with their target audience. Something that most businesses have found very difficult to do in 2023, although it does feel like the winds are changing. Maybe we'll touch on that a little bit later. So, Jordan, welcome.
Thank you.
So, as you can see, or if you're listening to the recording and hearing this, Jordan is my eldest son, and he arrived back home for Christmas yesterday morning after driving through the night from France. So very pleased to have him with me in the house, although he's upstairs and I'm downstairs.
Yeah, indeed. Apologies for the background noise of barking dogs if that's being picked up.
That's fine. It's a way of life, and I'm sure if someone knocks on the door right now, all 7 of the dogs that are in the house right now will start barking.
8.
And there's not a damn thing we can do about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what does a meaningful next step consist of in sales or customer success? That's the question that we are tackling this morning. Now, I want to hear from the audience. So, if you're out there and you're listening, please share what you think a meaningful next step consists of, and we can chat about that. But to get us started, I want us to think about this question through 2 different lenses. So the first is a typical sales lens. So, we're having a quote unquote sales conversation, and let's think about that question through the typical sales lens. And then next up, I'd like to look at this question through a relationship first lens. And kind of really what I mean by this is, most people in sales are spending most of their time doing research and thinking about ways in which they can search and qualify those people, those businesses that are in market for the solution that they have. And actually, as we've seen buyer behavior change significantly, that's becoming harder and harder to do as buyers simply don't want to work or speak to a salesperson unless there's already trust and some sort of relationship, some kind of affinity or rapport that's been built already. So we're big fans of a relationship first approach, but before we get there, let's look at this through the typical sales lens. Jordan, what's your view on this? What do you think a meaningful next step might look like?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one, because in the eyes of businesses, and if we're going to simplify the sales process, you've got lead gen, qualification, proposal, close. And I know that's overly simplified, but just for the purpose of this conversation, in the eyes of the business, a meaningful next step is moving to that next stage, right? And I think the issue with that is that it's very much focused on the sales org rather than the buyer and their journey. So in my eyes, a great sales process is one that aligns as closely as possible with those crucial stages within the buyer journey, right? And I understand why we put those stages into place. It's for forecasting, for our sanity, right? But I think really what a meaningful next step is once you've helped the buyer to move to their next stage in their process, once they've ticked off that box, that, okay, yes, I'm ready to progress further into the cycle. So I think, at the core of it, there's likely a much larger conversation to be had here, perhaps one for season 2, just around better aligning our sales process with the buyer journey. I think only then can we actually classify it as a meaningful next step, because at the end of the day, what matters is the buyer.
Yeah, I totally agree. 100%. And the more I thought about it, the more I came to that conclusion as we led up to this discussion. And so then I started to cast my mind to before that. So, what about that call that you're having? And what are some of the things that you might be thinking about as a salesperson, as a customer success manager on that call in order to get to a point where a meaningful next step is even possible? Things like, in a salesperson's mind, qualification. Good morning, Jackie, and Merry Christmas. Um, and is there a commercial interest? Am I going into this conversation as a salesperson thinking, well, is there a commercial interest yet? How am I going to qualify this person effectively? How am I going to uncover a problem so that I can then align to that solution? And I'd love to hear the audience's thoughts on this, but I think for the most part, salespeople go into the conversation with those things in mind, and therefore end up creating or having the opposite effect as you described, Jordan. It's all about them and it's not about the buyer and their next step.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, that then comes down in part um, to how well the salesperson, the sales individual understands that process and has all that information in mind, just sort of subconsciously. If the salesperson is really familiar with the process, really believes in it, really understands it and understands the buyer journey, then that can be sort of subconscious, just in the back of their mind, and they use it to guide rather than, and they're confident enough to ad lib and go off piste a little bit. And that's what creates that great buyer experience, because at the end of the day, at the forefront of their mind is the buyer. Whereas conversely, if the salesperson has that sort of is really overly conscious of, okay, I need to ask this question, I need to get to this stage, I need to do that, then the buyer really feels it. So I guess it really comes down to how comfortable and how confident and how well the salesperson understands the process to be able to ad lib and off piste.
And actually, is the meaningful next step when the buyer decides there is a next step?
Yeah, I could. Yeah, totally. As I mentioned, it should be the buyer. Of course, our goal at the end of the majority of conversations is to get a next step booked in, and that's fine to be cognizant of that. But rather than forcing the buyer down that rabbit hole and them no showing that next call, it's really about your goal is to get the buyer excited enough, inquisitive enough, curious enough to want to have that next call, but then also being really clear about what that next call consists of, right? So, rather than it just being
before you get there though,
yeah,
let me just jump in, because to the point that I mentioned and you're now talking to, I'm reminded of the situation that you and I had about 3 weeks ago, where you'd been made redundant from Vidyard, and you were preparing for an interview. And in that interview, you were asked to do a role play about qualification and discovery. And we role played that to prepare you for the interview. And even though I knew we were in role play, you were asking me questions that caused me to be more inquisitive and curious about what it is we were talking about. And actually, you weren't selling to me, but I reached a point through the questions you were asking me that I wanted to know more. I suddenly felt, as a result of the questions you're asking me, I think you've got something quite interesting, and I want to learn more, and I might actually potentially buy from you. even though you'd left that company.
Yeah.
But I really feel quite strongly that as salespeople, customer success people, if we can put the solution to the back of our mind and think about the questions that we want to ask the buyer,
Yeah.
questions that really stimulate thoughts in their mind, that trigger thoughts of actually, well, I want to know more. You've just turned a light bulb on in my head through the question, or as a result of the question you've asked.
Yeah.
And then that's you're kind of following the buyer experience without taking them anywhere other than helping them take themselves there.
Yeah, exactly that. It's a case of guiding them through that process and helping them come to that conclusion and think in a certain way.
Mm.
Um,
So how is it different then when we look at this question through the relationship first lens?
well, I think it's exactly as you just sort of mentioned. It's really a case of guiding the buyer through the process, and I think directional questioning here is very powerful, but it's got to be fluid enough that it feels natural, right? Because I think I know myself, a couple of years ago when I was just starting out, when I was thinking about directional questioning, it's about, okay, how can I ask these questions that's going to get someone there? Which that's at the crux of it. But I think, the way I was asking those questions, the way I was managing the call, it felt to the people that I was speaking to that I was just trying to get them to that next step, right?
Yeah.
That next stage. I was trying to qualify them.
Yeah.
And one of the points that it really clicked was during my time at Vidyard, where we were having a conversation. I think we may have been role playing again right at when I first joined. And the next step for me, I was an SDR there. So my meaningful next step was to intro them to an AE and get them on the demo. And I think we role played, and then you gave me some feedback that it was like, it just felt a bit like, you were trying to get me to that next step, and we sort of played with some ideas.
Forced.
Yeah, and we played around with some ideas, and we got back to really sort of focusing on the curiosity piece, identifying their current state, trying to align the questioning to get that information from them, which is ticking my boxes, but also getting them to think about what they're currently doing, right, and potential, positives and downfalls. But then as well, it sort of frames the conversation or frames that next step for me, because they've given me a load of information about where they need to improve, what they could do better. So rather than say, okay, well, I'll book that demo in with my colleague, it was, okay, well, based on what you just told me, would it be a good idea for me to introduce you to my colleague who can focus in on those key points that you want to improve upon? And we can identify and brainstorm, how video could fit into that and how video could enhance that process. And, it's just that small framing, small change of narratives, change of mindset that really has the biggest impact for the buyer, at least in my eyes. And I don't have the exact stats, but my no-shows for that demo decreased greatly after making that change.
Yeah, brilliant. We just had an awesome comment come in, by the way. Alex Foster, thank you so much for this. I think it could be an article, though. It won't all fit on the screen. I think just in summary, let's skim this. Let me skim this again. So good morning, Alex. A meaningful next step in sales is a crucial element that keeps the momentum going and maintains control of the sales process. It's a strategic approach and it's gradual. And she goes on to say, for the seller, a meaningful next step provides a clear direction and purpose to their actions, prevents them from being a wandering generality, instead allows them to be a meaningful specific, By understanding the buyer's desired outcomes, sellers can tailor their approach to address these needs directly. And I think that's the key, isn't it? Tailoring the approach. And with that, Alex, would love to connect after the show. Sounds like you'd be a great guest. That brings us to a close for season 1 of Walking Digital Corridors. Thank you to our audience for being with us on this journey. It's great to get season 1 out of the way. I think my note from this conversation is directional questioning needs to be a topic for the new year. Jordan, thank you so much for being on this journey with me. Let's hope your brother Jensen will reappear in the new year. Any final words from you, Jordan?
No, just hope everyone has a fantastic Christmas festive period. Takes that much needed time at the end of what has been a pretty crazy year for salespeople, to spend time with family, recharge, and get ready for what 2024 has to offer.
Yeah. And if you are in the unfortunate or fortunate position of December being the end of your Q4, go smash it. Good luck. Take care, guys.